New York and the United States of America.
When I heard that the second tower had been hit, I knew it was terrorism.
My own initial reaction was, okay, now it starts. The CIA, we have a phrase, showtime.
Get ready. Can. Yes, can. Get ready. Can. Yes, can. Get ready.
At the elementary school in Florida, President Bush is still unaware of the second plane strike in New York.
The president at that point was in the classroom. We had the TV set up in the hold room, and we observed the second aircraft flying into the second World Trade Center tower.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll tell you what's going on.
There was a hush across the hold room. I don't think that anybody moved for at least a few seconds. We were just stunned. And at that point, we needed to get an update to the president.
Get ready. Live. Yes, live. Get ready. Live.
I then performed a test that chiefs of staff always have to perform, and it's one of the tougher parts about the job. Does the president need to know? This was an easy test to pass, yes. I walked up to the president and I leaned over and I whispered into his right ear, a second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. That's all I said to him. And then I stood back from him so that he couldn't ask me a question.
At the count of three, everyone should be on page 153.
I was stunned. No one interrupts a president, not even in front of a classroom full of 8-year-olds. And then I saw the president's face, and there was a sudden gravity to it. It was quite clear that his chief of staff had brought him very bad news.
Good job. Go on.
President Bush sat and continued to listen to the children, but his eyes had a faraway look in them.
Go on.
He was staring. I remember he was staring. But I was focused on really getting out of his way and letting the words sink in.
Good job. Go on.
Following the impact of the second plane in New York, the city's emergency teams are trying to comprehend the scale of the crisis.
Over Fieldcom, we need them on West and Vesey Street, okay? Fieldcom on West and Vesey.
There are injured people, there are dead people. There is plane debris all over the place. Tires, pieces of the plane, buildings, glass. It was complete pandemonium.
Dispatch, urgent. People trapped on the 101 floor and the 102 floor. Manhattan received.
We have jumpers coming from the World Trade Center right now from the upper floors.
We were literally looking at people who were diving out of the building. They were voluntarily jumping out of the building.
People are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
It's not just to see it, to hear it when they land was nothing I'd ever heard before. It's indescribable.
I heard the sound and was probably about 15 feet away from me. And it was an enormous impact from this person who they refer to as jumpers. I've never believed that they actually say, I'm going to jump. I've always believed that the heat is just so ferocious that it just drives them out.
The mayor had just arrived, and so I went to the corner to talk to him, to tell him what I knew, to find out what he knew.
Joe said there are people jumping out of the towers. I was hoping that Joe was exaggerating, or maybe he was mistaken, because it was hard to contemplate people jumping out.
You know, he could see him shake. He said, no, really, the people are jumping. Look.
When I looked up, that's the first time I saw
a man throwing himself out of the 101st, 102nd floor. I just froze and watched him come all the way down. The moment of watching that was a complete change in feeling. I mean, I went from treating this as an emergency that was within the scope of our experience to this is beyond the scope of our experience. This is much worse. It's off the charts, and we don't have a plan for this.
More than 200 people jumped to their deaths.
Boys and girls, close your readers. Place them under your
In the
chair.
Florida school, news of the second plane strike has reached the reporters in the classroom.
Mr. President, are you aware of the reports of the plane crash in New York? Is there anything? Talk about it later. Thank you all.
He kind of brushed the question aside. He left the classroom and went into the room next door.
And I led him to the television. And for a few seconds, I would guess 5-10 seconds, the president stood there and watched.
There is the second plane, another passenger plane hitting the World Trade Center. These pictures are frightening indeed.
It was the depth and the breadth of the situation that really, it was so daunting at that moment.
We're now getting word again from the Associated Press now saying...
Bush's first call is with Vice President Cheney.
They hooked us up on the telephone and we talked about what the president should say in his speech to the nation. We both concluded that it was an act of terror and that we needed to say that.
As hundreds of people flood out of the World Trade Center complex, Mayor Giuliani has to find a base to try and manage the crisis.
I thought it was really important that we have a place where we had regular telephone lines so that we could make sure we reach the White House, the Defense Department, the governor. Also, from which we could coordinate the response in the rest of the city.
But the horror of what the mayor is witnessing is an overwhelming priority, and he has an urgent question for a fire chief.
I said, can we get those people out above the fire? And he didn't say no. He said, my guys can save everybody below the fire. That was a very, very eerie, very jarring thing to say, because what it said to me without saying it was, everybody above the fire is probably going to die, and there's nothing I can do about it.
All of the units responding to number 2 World Trade Center. Report in front of number 1 World Financial Center. The elevators on the 44th floor, don't use them, they're about to come down.
After the second tower was hit, that adds another level of fear if you have any kind of experience, because now you're saying to yourself, uh-oh, this is not just an ordinary day that I'm involved with here.
By now, more than 300 firefighters are in the towers, preparing to rescue what they fear may be as many as 50,000 people. With the elevators destroyed and communication difficult, they face a forbidding challenge.
Many of them had tremendous fears doing it, but they did their job.
19th floor, firefighter down. Tower number 2, 19th floor, firefighter down.
As fire crews struggle with the burning towers, 2 F-15 fighters are in a holding pattern off the New York coast, awaiting orders from the Northeast Air Defense.
From where we were, I could see the smoke coming from the towers. So, what do you want me to do? At that point, they came back and they weren't really sure. There was obviously some confusion with what the game plan was going to be next.
The crew commander, Major Kevin Nasipany, has to make an unprecedented decision: to set up a combat air patrol over New York, ready to intercept hostile aircraft.
This is what I foresee that we probably need to do. This stuff is going to keep on going. We need to take those fighters and then put them over Manhattan. Okay?
At that point, there were no rules. I mean, the rules just went out after that second hijack, after it hit the building. The checklist went out the window.
That's best play right now. If there's more out there, which we don't know, let's get them over Manhattan. At least we got some kind of play.
They called us back and said your new mission is to proceed directly to Manhattan and set up a combat air patrol.
Since the end of the Cold War 10 years earlier, the country's air defenses have been dramatically cut. The Northeast sector has just 4 fighters to defend 23 states and 130 million people. At the school in Florida, the president is about to speak to the nation for the first time since the attacks began 45 minutes ago.
President Bush walked into the cafeteria as stern and as solemn as I have ever seen him. And it must be a very difficult thing to announce to the nation that a terrorist attack has hit on American shores.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
As the president finishes his address to the nation, Major Kevin Nassipany in military air control has a new crisis.
Okay, I got an aircraft 6 miles east of the White House. Keep it clear there. Papa Tango.
The threatened attack on Washington triggers immediate evacuations.
Everybody out! Young women in my office were getting the message to run. Agents ran into the East Wing and said, run as fast as you can. And so they threw off their high heels and started to run.
One of my lead Secret Service agents came bursting through the door. And he came over behind my desk and he said, sir, we have to leave now. He didn't say, you know, would you come with me, please, or anything. He said, we have to leave now. He grabbed my belt with one hand, put his other hand on my shoulder, and literally propelled me out of the room, down the hallway, into a tunnel to the Presidential Emergency Operations Center.
The President's Emergency Operations Center is a bunker constructed to maintain the government in the event of a nuclear war. From here, Cheney can begin to organize a response to the attack on the U.S. His urgent concern is American Flight 77, now headed for Washington.
They had a report of